There are two groups here, essentially. There are people who are expecting a presentation for the Virtualworldz MOOC 24, 10th anniversary, as I understand it, for them. And then there are also our regulars for the Moon-based group, because I deliberately held it at this time so everyone would be accommodated, and I knew they would have be available. Okay, so let me give you an idea of what we're going on. First of all, welcome to week 4 in the Virtualworldz MOOC 24 schedule. Yeah, the loonies. And I recognize her. Okay, so first of all, let me see. I've been watching. Most people for the MOOC here have been putting things in chat. And so let me do that, particularly if for people that are able to read it better than for me to hear it. So welcome to week 4. What I'd like you to do for just a minute is to reflect on a moment that you've experienced and in the Virtualworldz MOOC, and share, or in the Moon group or whatever, Second Life, share something you learned that you enjoyed or that you found surprising. This is to make sure, or this is to see if everybody's awake in the chat. And we have quite a few people. Names I recognize, names I don't. Yeah, this is okay. Anything you maybe if you've attended any of the Virtualworldz sessions, anything you found surprising, that you enjoyed, that you learned about Virtualworldz? Okay, while you're thinking about that, what the purpose of this is kind of a quick exercise. It's a demonstration of what I believe to be one of the strongest features of Virtualworldz. That is a free, open interaction, sharing of ideas with what we have found to be geographically and experientially diverse others. In other words, from people all over the world. I am continually surprised or enjoy the fact that there are people from all over the world that we can meet with and talk. And I can learn things from them. So the reason I specifically put that is because unlike other social media, and this Second Life I view as a form of that communication genre, is that Second Life is not really a silo unless you just go to the same places. Silo where your voice kind of echoes off people like you. It's a different kind of experience. So, leading off this week of the Virtualworldz conference, or the Virtualworldz MOOC. Oh, okay, there we go, Delia. Yeah, Delia, I would second that. Absolutely, that's one of the, and sometimes very serendipitous meetings, and people that you then know for years. You find a lot in common. So, leading off the 4th week of the MOOC here is I would like to share, I get basically the privilege of sharing information about our group. Namely, it's a story of the success of a real, international, not-for-profit organization founded through collaboration, Second Life. And essentially it's, and then also with one of our exciting current projects, which is developing a futuristic, scientifically realistic, human-based base of operations on the Moon's South Pole, and then envisioning our ideas by building a full-scale virtual model in Second Life. Yeah, Peonia, I agree with the idea of serendipity. It's one of my favorite experiences in Second Life. So anyway, today what I'd like to do is to we have an hour together, and I'd like to spend the first, or kind of split the first 40 minutes between sharing about the Science Circle organization itself, and then about the Moonbase group. And then I'd like to teleport over to where we're building the Moonbase project to explain the design and a quick tour over there. So one of the things I like is I love the fact that you can chat and stuff at the same time somebody's speaking. So any feedback you have in chat, I can follow it pretty well. And so I invite you to ask questions, comment, talk to each other, share, all that good stuff. And that's a big part of our presentations in the Science Circle. So, what is the Science Circle? Well, we are in the amphitheater of one of the islands that belonging to the Science Circle. Here is our homepage URL if you'd like to go see what we're about. There are 3 islands. They're actually stacked on top of each other, north to south, but I didn't have room on the slide, so you are here as far as the Science Circle one, and then we've got Chemistry World to the south, which is actually used for classes, and then STEM Island to the north, which where the Moonbase is built at about 1,000 meter on a 1,000-meter platform. That are all administered by Science Circle people. And then if you're not aware, I don't know whether you got this information. This is kind of one of my teaching moments, but I'm not sure if you're aware that you're in among a large region, close to 100 regions or sims that focus on education. And they're built on the old Scilands mini-continent and then the UT system. Now, a lot of these areas that, so a lot of the areas that basically, they're all kind of come under one hat, and we've had a presentation by this organization, but it's the Virtual Worlds Education Consortium, which the dark green island there to the north where it says STEM Island and under Teaching Moments, that's where they are. That's their website. And so the area has had educational regions since the beginning of Second Life. And there used to be a lot of them. But unfortunately, the only ones left are the ones in green. So sadly, some of them have sunk into the Linden Sea, so to speak. Okay, so we were asked, speakers for the MOOC were asked to provide a biography. And so I had 3 parts of my biography. In the first part, I explained about what the Science Circle was. And you can see, yeah, it's kind of like a lot of Atlantis's, mainly because, funding went away. So at the top of my bio, I described the Science Circle organization. It's international. It's nonprofit. Actually, the technical word is not for profit. All volunteer, meaning members composed of vetted scientists and educators and plus science enthusiasts. Now, the reason why I think that's, thanks. Well, yeah, I have a very cute dog, but I'm not as photogenic as my dog. So I was trying to imitate him. So anyway, one of the things about having science enthusiasts in our group is because they're learning some of the things for the very first time. They're not trapped in a particular discipline and stuff. So a lot of times we get some very interesting ideas and questions and stuff from people who are simply interested in science. And I think that's and so in Second Life, of course, that is one of the pluses that we have. In other words, you don't know really who you're talking with. It's just whatever they, in other words, by what they look like. It's the voice sometimes gives them away, but it's basically chat. In other words, it's a very leveling field that we're in. And so you can see our history. We started in 2007. We're in our 16th anniversary. That's a picture of the very first Science Circle presentation in 2008. we formed a board of directors and then an actual real international not-for-profit organizations. Now, the interesting thing is that, like a lot of organizations in Second Life, few of us have met in person, which is, I find kind of remarkable, because considering how well we've worked together for so many years, I find that fact rather interesting. Okay, another kind of teaching moment here. How many people recognize those figures there? Anybody a business person or IT or anything else recognize what we're looking at? Yeah. That's, oh, really? Okay, Pionia raised his hand. Okay, so for those that haven't, what you're looking at is what's called the Gartner Hype Cycle. And so all technologies kind of, all technologies kind of follow this. And so what happens is that you have people that know about these things because, you know, they keep up with the technology. But then the media gets a hold of it, which haven't necessarily got any idea what it is. And so it's a little overhyped. Back in 2007, particularly in the summer, was the heyday for the first part of Second Life, because it was at the top of the hype cycle, and you could see it in the news all over the place. Now, you notice that some of those that were forming at the time, I've got them surrounded in red circles, 3D printing, Web 2.0 that became what's known as social media. It was just called Web 2.0 back then. Now, remember in 2007, that was before Facebook really took off. It's before any social media back then. So Second Life, virtual worlds were really well ahead of their time. And so by a couple of years, virtual worlds were no longer in the news, and they picked up some new darling. And recently we've had virtual reality in the news, and then it was replaced by artificial intelligence. And so, but that happens all the time in technologies. That's not unusual. A little teaching moment there for people who are not IT folks. Okay, so my personal journey, I'm watching my time here. My personal journey is I started in virtual worlds back in 1998 with Active Worlds. Has anyone ever seen that one? It was a very early, and it's still around, I'm surprised. And you could build stuff somewhat similarly to Second Life, except there was no voice and stuff. Voice had to wait until later technology. And then Second Life, of course, took off in 2007. And so one of the things I did was, for example, I started some classes either in Second Life. I was the department head. I could do pretty much what I wanted. So I went over to the architecture or interior design folks, and I looked at some blueprints, and I built a 3D version of their blueprints so that they could walk in, turn on lights, see the carpet, see how, you know, open doors, see how their lighting worked, the whole bit like that, which I think was very helpful for them. I also taught several courses with students from lots of different countries, US, France, Mexico, Turkey. You see some of the students up on the upper left and some of their names. And then a graduate course for nursing professors so that they could work in an interactive hospital ward, connect with students from other states. Really fun stuff that was actual real courses. And that's kind of what my introduction quite a while ago. Okay, so one of the things we did was to celebrate our 16th anniversary, that's this year. We built a display for the Second Life 21st birthday celebration. But for you guys that are here for the conference, what I'd like to do is, instead of just saying, this is what we did, I asked the group, I said, okay, well, what are the core forces that shape your experience in Second Life and the Science Circle? In other words, why do you keep coming back? week after week. And this is what they said. There's a lot of stuff in there. I think you may recognize some of it that may be your own voice. The humor, hope, no fear of judgment, acceptance, access to experts as well as science enthusiasts, thinking people. Yeah, excitement, absolutely. Creativity, curiosity, ideas, questions, diverse perspectives. Lots and lots of different things that people keep coming back to Second Life and in our science circle. Now, the science circle itself is got a lot of outreach. In other words, you can see that we've done a lot of different activities. We've had, international exposure, absolutely. We've had kind of long-term presentations on follow the food, and we have a planetarium. In fact, actually, I invite you to walk around this area. We've got 3 islands. You can go to all of them and walk around and see what's there, and you'll see there's a planetarium, and there's a moon base site where we meet. There's a full-scale HMS Beagle, Darwin's ship, and there's a display on the pandemic and population genetics. And up at, it's all, under the sea, yes. Okay, so both in the surface and there's a convenient teleport system that you can go to different places on, how long can you hold your breath? Well, a long time in Second Life. We're kind of have an extra pair of lungs in here, I guess. Okay, so anyway, as we've observed in many movies and stuff, this is, if you want to call it another teaching moment, if you look at movies, TV shows, there are ecosystems under the water. Delia built them on all 3 islands. There are meeting places. There's lots of good stuff. Yeah, I'll mention you again here, Delia, as we get going. But there's a lot of, if you've looked at movies, television shows, other medias, they've kind of perpetuated incorrect ideas about our world. So one of the latest, although it could be kind of artistic, in other words, they did it for artistic purposes, but the logo in the Second Life 21st birthday was actually in other words, it had the classic elements that people knew about for thousands of years. In other words, they thought everything was made of earth, water, fire, or air, or if you're old enough, earth, wind, and fire. Okay, group. And then, but science actually, atomic theory that's replaced that over the last couple hundred years is that things are made of atoms or different types of energy. But it's interesting that we still get those types of things. In other words, pseudoscience or whatever. So I just threw this up here. You can take a look at it. But popular explanations are also mixed with scientific ones. And so one of the reasons for the science circle is to not, in other words, for people to learn what scientific explanations. Some of the non-science explanations are kind of innocent. So for example, if you see movies with spacecraft whooshing through space, that's not scientifically backed up because nothing whooshes through space. There's no air. You got to have air to whoosh. And then, but sometimes they have serious consequences, such as denial of vaccines and climate change and such. And so we try to work with science here. Now, space is so, well, it is. You got kabooms and everything that you'd expect to see. Now, in the Second Life 21st birthday display, each Saturday at this time, we do presentations. And what I've done is kind of use this as a background. In other words, what we had in our display And then I gave some examples of the types of presentations we've had just in the last year. In other words, from August of last year to August of this year. So for example, in the formal sciences, we have, let's see, is tagline here today? You can raise your hand. I don't think I see tag. But anyway, tagline, Robert Hendricks, MD, PhD, yeah, he's usually here. He does presentations for us, and he hosts a weekly Maths Club. Let's see. So one of the parts of our presentation was on formal sciences. Another is the natural sciences. Now, many of our presentations feature, many of our Saturday presentations feature things having to do with natural sciences. You can see ranges everything from quantum mechanics to genetic modifications in agriculture. And so in the 21st birthday display, one of the interactive displays was called the Cattery. It's actually was on loan, so to speak, from Genome Island, which is a creation of Marianne Clark, who uses it to teach graduate students about DNA, genetics, that sort of thing. Okay, Delia, here's your chance to shine. Is that one of the exhibits, one of the big advantages of virtual worlds is that you get to visualize concepts in 3D. So one of the large exhibits we had on our 21st anniversary display was a freshwater beaver ecosystem. And it's kind of hard to describe that. It's much easier if you can actually walk through it and see the animals and see how they interact in the water and sounds and such. And you'll also find, okay, good. And you'll also find, like I said, Delia's a talented designer in Second Life, and you'll find a lot of her work in a lot of places. Okay, so in applied sciences, one of the things we wanted to show was that the, yeah, and it's good, is the connectedness of the sciences. Now, our theme was color and connectedness. So, for example, in order to show colors on a screen, essentially you're getting into computer science. Well, in order to show colors that kind of look like they go together, anyone a graphic artist, in other words, who knows about color theory and complementary and analogous and color triad and all that good stuff. But in any case, I didn't just choose the colors of our display randomly. Zinnia! Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I didn't just choose it randomly. I used colors. Yeah, exactly. I used colors that actually look like they went together. Another example, if you look at the title of the first presentation to give you an idea of how connected things are, it's hard to talk about artificial intelligence well without talking a little bit about ethics. And so now those are two very diverse subjects, but it's part of what we were trying to do to show the connectedness between the different sciences. Now in the social sciences, here we demonstrate how color is used in language, some of the types of really idioms where you see red or you're yellow or green with envy or tickled pink or feeling blue, and then how the same color can be expressed in different languages. Here again, these are all from our 21st, Second Life 21st birthday display, and then you can see some of the presentations. If I had my translator out, yeah, there you go. Okay, I can see that on the screen there, Ariane. Thank you. And then you can see some of the presentations in this area that we had. Yeah, Rojo. Okay, or krasny in Russian. Okay, so also interdisciplinary science. There's quite a few things in interdisciplinary science, but much of new technology or new knowledge comes from what kind of combining the ideas of what we've known in the sciences, and you get some new knowledge about combining it. So the next thing I want to share is how basically we've used the idea of interdisciplinary science as a major part of our moon. Okay, if I don't have it up there, thank you for that addition for read in Portuguese. Okay, let's see. Okay, so my second rouge, of course, Le Rouge. Okay, so the second thing I'd like to talk about is, so that's a little bit of an introduction to our science circle. You can see it's quite complex. Our organization does quite a bit thing, and you're welcome here every Saturday. And then also, if you look on our website, you'll see lots of other types of things that are going on. Prosh, if that's how you would pronounce it. You know, like paprika. Paprika is a big deal in Hungary. Well, yeah, I visited Hungary last year. Okay, or was it the year before, whatever. Okay, so in the second part here in the presentation, I will share a little bit about what I mentioned about the moon base, and then we're going to go visit it. Okay, so I have to watch my time, or at least what we've done so far. So another part of my bio here is that last year was our 15th anniversary. So instead of a party like we had on some of them, we decided to commit to a long-term project that kind of demonstrated the best of who we are. That is, scientists and educators and science enthusiasts from all over the world, different perspectives, different backgrounds. And so it's a very timely project, as you've noticed in the news that there's quite a lot of online resources because humans are seriously planning to return to the moon for the first time since 1972, back when I was in college, and I'm dating myself now. But here again, because I watched all of that stuff, and so here again, for people who are here for the Virtual Worlds MOOC, just like I mentioned for the Science Circle, it's not just what we do, but why we keep coming back every week to meet with each other. And here again, these are some of the things they've told me that they keep coming back. Here's some of the reasons why. You might notice some of them that are similar to the ones for Second Life or Virtual Worlds. But then there's new stuff. In other words, there's people of many ages. So some have actually experienced a moon landing. Some are new to this century, so to speak. It's a psychological and physiological challenge, an engineering challenge to actually build something on the moon. And so we welcome people from many different backgrounds. We're all working on a common goal. We're working both to talk about the moon base as well as to create one. Now, speaking of which, the moon base group meets every Monday. In fact, it meets at this time every Monday. In the area we actually usually meet is just down below or on the other side of the amphitheater. You're welcome to go over to take a look at it. Yeah, exactly. but Sears, that's why I scheduled it for this time so we would have plenty of participants. Okay, so even before we met in earnest, because I knew the moon-based group people would be here. Okay, so even in earnest, we recognized that we needed interdisciplinary expertise in areas such as science, education, construction, programming, psychology, ethics, writing, outreach, So we have since realized that it's nice to have a medical doctor with us, an illustrator, to show how our base works. All of these go together to be able to, well, and it is. In other words, most of the missions that we've had to the moon, for lots of reasons, have only been maybe a week long. In other words, 3 days there, a couple days on the moon, 3 days back. In other words, a short little vacation. You can almost hold your breath for a week. Not really. I mean, maybe in Second Life. Okay, so anyway, now, look at some of the topics here and tell me whether these wouldn't make an interesting topic for a weekly discussion. So in other words, talking about a moon base might be like, ho-hum, how can you possibly do that for a year and a half? But the fact is, well, says you're right, and then they're talking about the compatibility between the spacecraft that is supposed to rescue them and the Boeing one and stuff like that. In other words, we've yet to work out where, because of different, particularly with the commercial part of it, we've yet to work out whether they can fit together and be able to transfer people and stuff like that. But in any case, look at some of these. In other words, okay, common spaces. Great. What culture should be reflected in those common spaces? Would you care if your health is monitored? In other words, the air you exhale out of in your room, every time you go to the bathroom, to the toilet, checking on pathogens from your waste. Should there be any rules regarding relationships and sex? What about how do you pay for items from the earth? In other words, is it nonprofit? What money source? What are we doing? Who's in charge? There's so much stuff. Well, and syzygy, that's why one of the things about one of the groups that are going to the moon, there is a agreement called the Artemis Accords. And one of the agreements is interoperability. In other words, just like computers, the very fact that you guys are all in Second Life is the fact that no matter where you are in the world, it all works the same on your computers. You may have different 3D viewers, but essentially we can all be here. That wasn't the case in the early days of computers, for example. Okay, so there's lots and lots of topics that we've discussed over the years that are rather fascinating. So one of the first things we had to do is to kind of find out, well, in real life, so to speak, first life. I hate the word real life because right now this is real life. I mean, I'm spending an hour with you guys. But so I usually call it first life versus second life. But since we wanted our virtual moon base to be anchored in real science, we kind of had to go through the history of our relationship with the moon, how we got there, all of that good stuff. And I just mentioned, Cyril, and that's the case. Even back in the 60s when they signed the moon treaty, there were a lot of people that didn't sign it. And then same thing in the 80s, there was another treaty and stuff. So getting anyone, lots of people all over the world to sign the same treaty is really hard. Okay. And Delia, and that's kind of how one of the things is that, and that's also has to do with like the governance and all that. In other words, what's the currency if there's currency? And so I'll give a list here of some of the types of things we've already agreed to. But the moon is very inhospitable, for one. We found that out, and so we have to be able to protect. One way that we kind of concluded was that Luna coins, okay, we can always trust, by the way, and I mentioned humor, we can always trust syzygy to come up with some sharp quips. Okay, so one way that we concluded was we needed to build our base mostly under the surface because it's a fairly hostile place to spend much time. And so we were thinking, wouldn't it be nice to have to build inside the lava tube? That way you're not having to do a lot of excavation. Now, this is a new divulgence here for the Moonbase group. You're going to learn something new. Did you see the article that they said that they found lava under the South Pole? In other words, we knew that in the Maria, in the middle parts of the moon, that there are lava tubes like the one over here on the bottom right. But we were kind of debating whether there are lava tubes at the South Pole. But now there could possibly be, because they have found evidence of lava in the past. Of course, there's no current lava on the moon. You're not going to break into a lava tube and there'd be lava right now. But so we decided that, okay, since this is a virtual moon base and we can decide whatever we want, we just wanted to make it scientifically plausible, is we decided to build our moon base in a virtual lava tube. And so now, one of the things we learned was that lava tubes on the moon theoretically are much larger. They could be hundreds of meters in diameter. So there's plenty of room for building a base on the lava tube. Now, another thing we looked at was NASA and ESA have held contests from people all over the world about what designs that they had for the moon base. And so one of the power, of course, I'm going to give you a few ideas. Power, of course, is a crucial part of living on the moon. And so the concepts for power generations have varied from very simple, like up on the upper left. In other words, that's just solar panels that fold out, and then the solar powers convert. You could put ice in there, and they convert it to water, and then use electrolysis to convert that to oxygen and hydrogen, which can be used for a fuel. So that's very important. But the one to the right is actually a much more complicated design by a Chinese team that basically said, okay, look, in the next few decades, we're going to be able to have fusion reactors. So let's just put a fusion reactor in the middle there, and it will have plenty of power. Okay, now how we live on the moon is very cultural, and it has a lot to do with whether you China syndrome. Well, maybe. Okay, but we decided maybe if we had a reactor that it wouldn't be right in the middle of our complex. But in any case, how will we live on the moon has been the topic of many discussions. So, for example, if you just had a robot-operated facility, you wouldn't need water or air or anything else. So once you start putting, the whys, in fact, actually one of our recent things is the why. I mean, why are we going there? Absolutely. So we've been talking about our mission and the way we look at people. So, for example, should individual spaces be Spartan in design, like up on the upper left? In other words, that the goal of research is takes precedent over human compatibilities, comfortabilities. Should it be shared, or should you have a private space? Up in the upper right is I'm a retired Navy officer, among other things, and I lived a lot of time. That's actually a officer's quarters up there where you share spaces with other people. We kind of said we'd like to have a private space for each of us. Now, who should live there? Should it be just kind of like working adults like you find in a business, or should we include families? In other words, if you're going to be gone for some period of time, you might want to do that. Including families, of course, is a bit more complicated. And then, of course, transporting things from the Earth to the moon can be logistically and financially prohibitive. So almost everything that we make must be made or repaired up there. For example, one of the things I didn't include in the last version of the moon base is a large 3D printer, which we would need to have, because you can use regolith, in other words, the moon soil, to do that. Now, water, of course, is extremely precious. I mean, more important than almost anything. So essentially, the very humidity from your breath needs to be collected. Anything that you eliminate from your body is full of elements and atoms and complex things that cannot be found on the moon that can be used to create things. So finding an example to reuse or recycle. So for example, one of the things we thought about was, instead of washing clothing, well, exactly, recycled breath. Instead of having clothing that you'd have to wash, we were saying, okay, if you take a shower, of course, all the water then is recycled. But if you take a shower or something, then you put on clothes, you put them on, you wear them, and then you put them in a recycle container so when they get dirty, and that's up to you as to when they get dirty, and then they are recycled to become another outfit. The only thing involved in there, of course, is the power that's needed to do that. Recycling always takes power. Speaking of which, now, here's your moment to shine. Is the moon the moon can be a difficult place to visualize. So, for example, we have a talented illustrator, and these are just a few of the illustrations that Operative has created so that we can kind of describe visually some of the things that we're looking at, and then also we need. Yeah, thank you. And then, well, you did the work there. Well, hey, Pi, the thing about libraries, a good old-fashioned hold it in your hands book, even if it's essentially a Kindle, is something that we want to make it feel like it's home. The more we make it feel like home, the less then that you will have psychological issues about being so far from Earth as we are. Okay, so here's some of the here are some of the decisions we made so far. First of all, this isn't the first. We decided that we want to get past all the idea about, we don't want to dismiss, we just want to get past about the idea about, like, where do we get our water, air, how does resupply work? So we're kind of decades in the future. We want to be preferably in a lava tube. We want to respect the customs, language, expression of cultures. People in their own rooms could do whatever we want. We still probably haven't worked out like what culture is expressed in common areas, including color. As I mentioned, colors mean different things in different cultures. We determined that instead, at least for ours right now, you're talking about working adults that are physically, mentally, emotionally vetted. No tourists, no billionaires, unless a resident happens to be a billionaire, but no billionaire tourists. We would one day like to have families, but we just haven't provided that yet, although we might think about that. We'd like to have everybody have a individual space, a little place they can call their own, privacy. We want to do research. There's an enormous amount of, and anyone going back to the moon, one of the primary things is to do research on materials, on people living on the moon, a place to call home, absolutely. Okay, and then, idealistic, but we want to get past all this thing about pay disparity, about not trusting people, about trying to control women's health, all the types of stuff that you see down on Earth, and treat people basically equal and with respect. Okay, that's kind of what we decided for our moon residents. And since it's not on the moon, it's a virtual space in Second Life, we want it to be educational and interactive. Yeah, that's a very meta statement there, but I like it. Okay, so now let's take a look then, before we go take a look at the base itself, let me just show you what you're looking at. by educational space, it's a region-sized platform at 1,000 meters above a STEM island. Okay, it's educational in nature, in the keeping of the mission of the Science Circle, and that there's basically a full-scale mock-up of the, for example, one of the things that you won't see, except I will show you, there's a pathway to it, will be a full-scale mock-up of the Gateway Space Station. There's going to be basically an Earth home, so that you can, so that we can say, well, you know, we're going to need a place to eat, we're going to need a bathroom, we're going to need a place to stay, so people can relate. Hey, Tag. Okay. So the yellow area, now, through the miracle of textures and objects in Second Life, we're able to do this, and I'll show you when we get up to the space. Hey, Tag. So anyway, there is basically a place you can walk around and see in, but people on the moon base can't see out. In other words, it looks like they're on the moon. And so we have also mock-ups of free versions of our base. We'll be going there shortly. Let me just, I'm watching the time. We'll probably have a few more minutes of explanation, and then that way you'll know what you're looking at. Okay, so version 1, which you won't see much of because it's actually under the surface, is a large 60 meter in diameter sphere that's kind of based on an early 1989 concept with a big sphere. Now, spheres are big because you're talking about a pressurized area where there's working and living going in our model. Now, in our model, we kept the living and working separately. But so in version 2, we basically, it's almost like a cell. Max should appreciate that. I see that Max, let's see, Max, are you here? I saw that you came in online anyway. Okay, so anyway, in our model, we've got in the second version over here, here's one slide and here's the second that shows how complicated it is essentially, it's based on the types of things that we saw in the contest that NASA and ESA held. And so this is fully built in the moon base area, and a lot of it is kind of transparent and stuff because and some of it's phantom, so be careful. But basically you can fly through walls and you might drop through things, and it's mostly phantom, so it's easier to build it and to see how everything relates inside the structure. Now, phase 3, or the third version of the space station, we kind of looked at the second version and then we improved on it and got feedback. And so this is kind of now only one level has been built of this. It's just a mock-up, not fully built, because we're continuing, before we flesh everything out, so to speak, we're continuing to look through, in other words, we're continuing to improve what we have. Okay, so now let's see. So let's go on a field trip. My timing is about right here from what I had expected. So it's 1,000 meters up on STEM Island. You can fly up there. It takes 30 seconds. Yeah, well, it can be if you. But one of the things, actually, before we go up there, let me give you a 20-seconder. When I first showed Second Life to some professors at the university where I was working, is one of the professors got up and walked out of the room because I showed them that you can go up to a cliff and fall off a cliff in Second Life and there's no consequences. And he says, well, I'd never do this because there's no consequences. And I was kind of thinking in my head, well, what did he want my avatar to die or something? But, people, to get used to the fact of this being a virtual world and consequences and being scary and all that, it's a new paradigm shift for a lot of people. Okay, can everybody hear me still? Hello. Okay, everybody can hear me still. We got lots of people. Okay, so let's go up to here. Take a look. See this one? I'm going to go up, Up, and over to... Now, the color scheme is kind of interesting because a lot of it was thought up by our illustrator, Operative. Her colors were a little more pastel. I made them a little more brilliant. But I use that. Now, what you're seeing here is, let me just show you around a second, and then we can take a look around. Okay, over here where syzygy is, if you look beyond here, is where you can see it's mostly green on the surface because that's a what do you call a not terrarium? What do you call an agricultural area that you create? My where plants are. Well, not a farmer's. By the way, I've a greenhouse. Yes. Okay. Darn. I'm getting old. Okay. So by the way, for you guys that are afraid of heights, you can walk off this thing right here, and you can't really walk off. It's got a invisible barrier, so you don't walk on it. If you stay here, now if you walk down the path, that's not guaranteed. Okay. So now. Version 2 is that huge sphere over there. Yeah. Okay, version 2 is a big sphere over there that you can... now, you're welcome to go look at all of these things closer. It's just I'm giving, in the time we've got about 4 minutes for the hour, I'm giving you just an idea. By the way, this big rocket over here is an actual size of the SpaceX's Starship, which was originally designed for going to Mars, not the moon. But right now, this is what NASA is probably going to use, unless they have another bidder, for landing on the moon. You can see it's rather enormous. But it can also carry a lot up to the moon. Okay, so this is version 3. You can see it down below. This is just one level of version 3. So you have version 1, which is mostly under the surface, version 2, and version 3. Now, right behind Operative over here is, if you want to follow me, we've got about 3 minutes before the end of the hour. I know some of you probably have to leave. Okay, for you guys that are afraid of heights, this is going to be scary, but walk along the path. You can fall off. So kind of watch your step.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at our VW MOOC and the Moon Base. Hope you come and visit.